Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining us. Well, we're going to chat about the youth mental health crisis, which is significant and important. But first, how about energy supplies and prices, something we all have a big interest in after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, an important subject, energy prices and supplies. They're critically important to all of us. Joining me to talk about that is Terry Fitzpatrick. He's the president and CEO of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
All right. What's the big picture when it comes to energy prices? That's something we all have a big interest in.
We do.
It's called your monthly bill, right?
We do, and we represent the electric and gas utilities, and we know that's a big thing for folks when they get their electricity bill or the natural gas bill in the mail, or sometimes not by the mail, with the way folks pay bills now. But
sure.
The big picture is, we came off a rough year. Last winter, if we look back to 2022-23, there were a couple of shocks that really hit the energy systems. You had the war in Ukraine, which, on a global basis really changed the dynamics with energy supplies and with prices. And then we were coming out of the pandemic, so demand was starting to ramp up as businesses got going again. So all of that led to some really high prices last winter. And then, it's funny how this works, different things that you can't predict. We had a warmer than usual winter last year. That helped to ease the demand for energy, which causes prices to come back down. At the same time, production was ramping up a little bit more.
And it's not been overly cold this year, right?
Not so far, but we did have a cold snap here recently.
Yes, we did.
So all of that led to a real moderating of prices coming into this winter, Terry, which is good news, of course, for consumers. The predictions out of the federal government, which studies these things closely, is that they think energy prices will continue to be at a more moderate level for the next year. But, of course, that always depends on things that you don't know that can happen. What if another war breaks out that interrupts energy supplies, or, what if the weather turns extreme? Those things, you can always have those kind of shocks, but things look better for consumers as far as their energy prices go.
Yeah, and are there aspects outside of the United States, I mean, the war in Ukraine and other things that could affect our energy prices?
Yeah, they absolutely do, and they affected the price of natural gas and electricity, because once that war broke out, and then eventually Russia virtually cut off all supplies to Europe, that meant that countries like Germany all of a sudden were facing a real problem. Germany was able to build a liquefied natural gas import facility in a year. It went through permitting, construction, had it going in a year, which was amazing. But then where are they going to get the liquefied natural gas from? Well, among other places, they got a lot of it from the United States, because with the shale gas development, we were able to ship more liquefied natural gas for them, and I think we're going to continue to do that. But that also affects prices here, because we have global markets on these things. So what happens in one part of the world, affects everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other things that we need to talk about is a formal energy policy and what that means. Take it.
Right. Well, a number of states, in fact, probably over half of them, have some type of a formal energy policy. For example, New Jersey has an energy master plan. In Pennsylvania, we don't really have that. I think at least part of the reason for that is the fact that we've got, a division in political power here in the state. The Democrats now control the governor's office, which they have for the past, 10 years or so, for 2 terms now. And also in the legislature, the Democrats have a majority in the House, although it's a razor-thin margin. But then we still have a Republican-controlled Senate. The two parties have different priorities when it comes to energy and climate issues. And so coming up with a coherent and comprehensive energy policy is pretty difficult under those circumstances.
Yeah. Let's run to a break. When we come back, I have a couple of other questions about that. And the fact is we are a big energy producing state, which is also plays into all of this debate over energy. We'll do that and more soon.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right. Obviously, Terry, there's a big debate about energy, its sources, where it comes from. We've turned out to be a huge, huge natural gas supplier, not just in the state, but throughout the country, and even, sending it overseas.
Correct. Yes, we have a long tradition of that. First oil well drilled here. We had the coal industry. Bituminous in the western part of the state, anthracite in the northeast region, where I hail from, and now natural gas with the development of Marcellus Shale. Yes, Pennsylvania is an energy powerhouse. We're the one of the leading electricity producers in the country, too. I think we're the third biggest state in terms of electricity production. We're the biggest exporter of electricity, so we send it to the different states around us. So. Yeah, that's a big part of Pennsylvania's tradition, supplying energy for its own use and also for other states' use.
And it's become more controversial because of the significance of the environmental movement in this state and elsewhere.
Yes, whenever I talk about energy policy, now you can't talk about that without talking about climate policy, because so much of it is related to the concern over climate change. But again, here you have a partisan divide here to some extent. The Democrats, if you look, for example, let's look at New Jersey, their energy master plan. It is very, very heavily focused on reducing emissions, on shifting towards renewable energy. On the other hand, I've looked at some of these. If you look at Indiana, which is more of a red state, although they do produce a lot of wind energy in Indiana, so they kind of have a renewable tilt. If you look at their energy policy, they talk more about a balanced approach, where you need to look at affordability, reliability, and environmental sustainability, and where you need a diverse energy mix to do that. Or so maybe you could say an all of the above approach, where you don't rule out different fuels like natural gas, maybe even coal, as long as you find a way to reduce emissions compared to where you are now.
Now, you also referred to 30 by 30. Explain that, you get 30%. Go ahead, you explain it.
Yeah, 30 by 30 is a way of describing a law that some folks want to pass that would require us to get 30% of our total electricity usage from renewable energy sources by the year 2030. So therefore, 30% by 2030. There's legislation in the legislature that would do that. Governor Shapiro indicated during his campaign that he supported that. So that's something that's getting more discussion now. But again, you have a partisan divide on this. Most Democrats favor that. Most Republicans are wary of it because they're afraid it would affect costs, and also because of the concern that renewable energy is not available 24/7. There is a concern in our region with the grid. PJM, which runs a regional power grid, has been sounding the alarm that we need to keep on board natural gas and coal plants, which have been retiring too quickly, because we need to keep reliable sources of energy in order to keep the lights on.
Has Shapiro changed the policy very much from the Wolf administration? I don't read much or hear much about it.
Well, the biggest issue there is RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That's a cap-and-trade program that would require power plants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Governor Wolf joined RGGI through a rulemaking process. Once those rules became final, they were appealed. Commonwealth Court said, no, you can't do that by a rulemaking. You need a law to do that. It's unconstitutional to do it by rulemaking. Governor Shapiro still isn't committed, hasn't said he's committed to RGGI, but he did appeal the Commonwealth Court decision to the state Supreme Court. So they will now have the ultimate say on constitutionality.
All right, you've written this, and I'll let you comment about this. We have a relatively moderate energy policy that has allowed us to develop energy supplies and still take some steps to reduce emissions.
Yes. I think because of the tension between having shared power between Democrats and Republicans, that has had the effect. Now, neither party is completely satisfied with our energy policy. But the end result at this point is it's steered us towards a more middle course. For example, states around us some of the states around us ban hydraulic fracturing for natural gas. We regulate it, but we allow it. We have done things, on the other hand, to reduce emissions. We have mandates and subsidies for energy efficiency improvements.
Sure.
For some renewable energy, I think it's 8% under the current law. It's not 30%, it's 8%, but we do have some. So we've steered a more centrist type course, which I think has probably served us well compared to some other states.
All right, thanks for the update. All right, coming up, a very important topic. Do we have a youth mental health crisis? We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by
Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, my next guest says, yes, there is a youth mental health crisis. How important a subject is that? And the guest is Justin DeFrio. He's a program services manager with the Family Support Alliance. Justin, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, before I get into that, what's the PA Family Support Alliance?
Yeah, so the Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance, we are a statewide child abuse prevention nonprofit organization. So in short, we do everything from education to mandated reporter training to developing resources and training programs for youth, families, and the professionals working with them in the communities, all focused on child abuse prevention.
And do you work with different organizations in the various counties to do that?
Absolutely, all across the state.
Yeah, I thought so. All right. The big question, and boy, when you sent the material that you wanted to talk about, youth mental health crisis, is there one, and what's causing it?
Sure. So, that's a little bit of a loaded question because there's a lot of pieces that can go into that. But just looking at some of the numbers, we have, Pennsylvania in and of itself ranks about third in terms of youth who report having some sort of severe mental disorder. And then nationally, we have 1/3 of youth who are reporting having some anxiety or depressive disorders. And then when we drill the numbers down even more, we're looking at, back in 2021, we're looking at about 1 in 5 youth who've seriously considered suicide. And
1 in 5?
1 in 5. And 1 in 10 who have actually attempted suicide. So the numbers, when you drill down, certainly are leaning towards that way of there being a serious issue around mental health for our children and for U.S. students. And so I think there's a lot of different things that could play into that, but the numbers are certainly indicating it.
Now, some youth populations are more affected by it than others. Is that correct?
That is correct. So about going back, looking at 2022 data, about 9% of U.S. students have reported some sort of attempt at suicide. But
9%?
9%. And then when you look at students who are black or have 2 or more races, that number jumps anywhere from 12 up to 25%.
And that's just what gets reported?
That's just what the data is showing, either through self-report or through incident reporting.
And there
correct.
could be, you would expect that there would be more, I would think, than get reported.
Certainly. There most likely are cases that are not captured in that data.
Yeah. So the youth population differences, is it by age? Is it by race? Is it by gender?
Yeah, so it depends what route you go down in terms of what you're looking for that may be causing this. But what we are seeing global or nationally, I should say, is that yes, there is a mental health crisis happening. There are mental health issues that are or concerns that are occurring. So what we're doing at Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance, we're looking at, well, what is some of the through lines of those concerns? And that's where we look at social media really being a through line in terms of exacerbating that issue.
Yeah. We're going to run to a break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you about the role played, and I'm going to hold this up, by the social media, which we get through iPhones and all sorts of other ways that we now communicate with each other. Back soon.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, youth mental crisis. Social media has emerged as a huge factor, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So what we've seen really is as the mental health crisis has begun to develop, one of the contributing factors that really may not necessarily be the root cause, but is exacerbating some of the mental health concerns is social media and digital technology. So that's everything from the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, to the devices themselves, such as your phone or your tablet or any other way you may be accessing social media platforms. They really play a role in exacerbating the mental health crisis.
And the young people, the kids, if I can use that expression, they find ways to communicate that are novel, don't they? That are very unique.
They sure do. And to that point, you touch on something really important. That really is part of their reality. We may look at our phones for something or send out a post on social media here and there, but kids and youth are really going in between the real world and their world in social media several times a day, all day long. And so what they see and what they do on social media really impacts their real life.
Yeah. So that leads me to a very significant question having to do with the role that parents play in terms of protecting the children on these social media platforms.
Yeah, so, and that's where PFSA's main focus is. So parents have a critical role in protecting children as it relates to mental health and especially the role social media plays. This is a new era where children have access to social media and digital technology very early in life and for more periods of time than my generation or any generation before.
Yeah, even before the teenage year, many of them have iPhones, for example.
Absolutely, that's correct. And many of them are given iPhones with no guidance, no support, no monitoring. Not in any intentional way, but in a way where these devices and this technology is really built to get children and young folks hooked and engaged for very long periods of time, which certainly has an impact on mental well-being.
Yeah, this has to have a huge psychological impact on our children.
Yeah, it certainly does, and we're still collecting data to figure out exactly what impact that has. But with PFSA and our Family Digital Wellness Initiative, what we're really trying to focus on is that yes, guide rails are important, so parental controls, limiting screen time, things like that, but also building capacity and building competence in our children as it relates to using these technologies and platforms is just as important.
Yeah, we can talk about what the Pennsylvania legislature, lawmakers can do, but ultimately it really does matter what happens with parents and other guardians of the young people. I mean, that's the first place we need to look in order to gain some sense of control over the use of social media by our children.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so while it's very important to have laws and legislation that helps regulate these things, and those are very important pieces, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. And like you said, the first point of contact being in the home. So it's almost like, to give you a simple analogy, if you have a child, when they're very young, you want to keep them away from the stove. You don't want them to go near the stove.
Sure.
Eventually, they need to learn how to
But a lot of children I know, 10, 11, and 12, have iPhones.
Yeah, it's true.
And access, go ahead.
Yeah, and earlier they're getting access to it. Yes, exactly to your point. So again, what we're trying to do with our Family Digital Wellness Initiative is, how do we build competence? If we know they're going to have access to them, whether it be at home or in school or at a friend's house, how do we build confidence? How do we teach them what to look out for? How do we teach them to identify red flags? When something does occur that's not good for them, how do we teach them the steps to follow so that they know what to do in a situation like that? Regulations help provide some buffer and safeguards, but the building of capacity and competence help to optimize what they do and how they handle situations like that to reduce risk.
Yeah. Now, there's also a role for the legislature, state legislature, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you mentioned, we have a lot of state legislature, and actually in the nationwide, we have states that are banning social media from certain statewide devices. We have locally a lot of schools and a lot of other senators and legislators who are trying to propose legislation to have a parent have to sign on for a student or a young child to have an account on social media. Again, all very important steps, but it's not the whole picture, and it's not the only thing that we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, this is a very complicated subject that has many, many moving parts, and it's not as though we're talking about the use of social media, which is relatively limited. I mean, it is so not just complex, but universal throughout our entire society.
Absolutely, it most certainly
It's the way we communicate.
It's the way we communicate, it's the way we engage, the way we interact, the way we build relationships now. And so all the more reason, we really encourage parents and caregivers to not only become aware of some of these issues, but become educated, and then walk alongside their child or those young folks who are in their lives to help them build capacity and competence around this issue. That's the ultimate thing that in the long term will help build some safety.
And they're, in many respects, just following what the parents do.
Exactly, role modeling. It's the number one thing that children do, is they observe their parents and they observe the adults around them and what they do. So we have to equip ourselves so that we can help equip our children.
Yeah. Well, look, please keep us informed about this. This is an extremely important subject.
Certainly.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, you stay well.